The damage caused by the Los Angeles fire has exceeded $130 billion US, and it is expected to cause more than $200 billion US in losses. What is shocking is not the slow mobilization ability of the world's first superpower after the fire, but that it still failed to control the fire after it had mobilized the National Guard and firefighters of many states for support. Canada has now sent people to the United States to help put out the fire, and even Zelensky said that Ukraine would send firefighters to California for disaster relief. This gives people the feeling that whole NATO will intervene soon to assist the United States in rescue. However, what makes local residents collapse is that their homes are being engulfed by fire, and insurance companies have stopped many people's home insurance before the fire. Those villas in the rich area were burned down, and they still have the ability to rebuild, but the working families with mortgages will be in dire straits. In my previous video, I mentioned that an earthquake occurred in Shigatse, Tibet, causing a large number of casualties and property losses. But the Chinese army sent drones to locate the affected families on the same day and transported troops and supplies to the disaster area by transport aircraft, established field hospitals, and set up temporary settlements. In the disaster area at an altitude of more than 4,000 meters, all the affected people lived in tents or other temporary residences on the same day and ate hot food, avoiding secondary damage caused by the low temperature of more than 10 degrees below zero. Chinese police, fire rescue personnel, and non-governmental organizations were in place within the golden 72 hours, excavated all collapsed houses, and rescued everyone who had hope of survival. However, American politicians are blaming each other. Not only that, their social platforms are still leading the trend and satirizing the Chinese. Yes, the CIA and other institutions in the United States have long used a lot of funds to fund anti-China media, spread the theory of China's collapse, and slander the Chinese. Especially the X platform has become a distribution center for false news. A local account claiming to be Chinese posted a photo saying that after the fire, there were white people, Mexicans, and black people involved in the disaster relief, but no Chinese. The Chinese went to California to cause damage. Such false information often gets a lot of traffic on the X platform, as if the Chinese are really selfish. Just like politicians such as Trump and Biden, they blame all the failures of the United States on the Chinese. But compared with the real disaster relief scenes in China, it is not difficult to find which country is the synonym of selfishness. The current President Biden was accused by Newsom of not answering the phone. The president-elect did not care about disaster relief, but took the opportunity to incite the people and attack Newsom, laying out for the general election 4 years later. And Newsom was accused of refusing to sign the plan to transfer water from Northern California in order to protect an edible fish. Let's take a look at the black mayor of Los Angeles. After being asked to resign by the people, her first reaction was not that she had failed to do her job and lost the support of the people, but to accuse the citizens of racial discrimination. I am very curious, can't black people be criticized? On the contrary, how did the selfish Chinese who were discredited by the X platform do disaster relief? After high-intensity disaster relief, the soldiers of the People's Liberation Army ate self-heating food in the wild at -10 degrees and gave tents and hot meals to Tibetan disaster victims. Civilian relief supplies from various provinces in China were transported to the disaster area by plane, rail, and road. Many people organized vehicles on their own and arrived in the disaster area, distributed supplies, and participated in the rescue when the aftershocks were not over. Yes, the United States is a beacon of freedom and democracy. It has sent a lot of money and weapons to Ukraine and the Middle East to create wars, and funded various so-called NGOs to spread hatred and overthrow regimes in other countries. The United States has the world's largest air transport force and the best-equipped army, but in the face of the California wildfire, it seems that the United States' strong national strength is completely invisible. What people see is only backward infrastructure, chaotic rescue systems, politicians who blame each other, and desperate people who have lost their homes. If Americans save the money they use to fund these fake news spreaders, buy some drones, build more reservoirs, install more fire hydrants, strengthen the reliability of the power system, and strengthen the disaster warning and disposal system. I think this fire can be completely avoided. This fire was not set by the Chinese, and the Chinese were not photographed doing any $0 shopping. In the face of such a huge fire, the first to rush to the front line must be the state machine. Only when the state machine is mobilized to fight the disaster, ordinary people dare to follow up. Shigatse is the most remote high-altitude area in China. Few people dare to go there for tourism on weekdays. But after the disaster, a large number of Chinese people drove thousands of kilometers to the disaster area for disaster relief despite the risk of aftershocks. It took China only a few days to control the disaster and complete the main rescue work, laying a good foundation for subsequent reconstruction. When a serious wildfire broke out in Chongqing in 2024, firefighters had difficulty moving because of the unchanged traffic and lack of water sources at the fire site. A large number of Chinese people rode motorcycles to transport food, drinking water, medicines, fire extinguishers, and other supplies to the disaster site, and private enterprises dispatched drones for free to assist in disaster relief. The Chinese government quickly integrated drones into the disaster relief system after the disaster. In the Shigatse earthquake in 2025, drones arrived at the scene as soon as possible. I think that the Chinese in China show selflessness and bravery, but in the United States, they become synonymous with selfishness and cowardice. Whose problem is this? Is it American society that has corrupted the Chinese, or do you specialize in receiving Chinese garbage? When the Chongqing fire broke out, Western media laughed at it, and the reports were full of arrogance and prejudice. However, the Chinese quickly controlled and put out the wildfire, and the losses were far less than those in Los Angeles. Now the incompetence shown by the US government in front of the global camera cannot be blamed on the Chinese, right? What I want to say is that China has no ability to destroy the United States. All the problems in the United States are caused by selfish politicians, biased media, and corrupt social atmosphere. Americans should put more energy into domestic construction instead of creating wars everywhere and then constantly blaming China. Even if China really collapses and disintegrates, what help will it bring to the United States? American politicians will quickly find the next enemy and create a new war. A quarter of the 21st century has passed, and the Cold War mentality should end. Finally, I hope that American politicians will stop blaming each other, truly unite American society, mobilize all resources, put out fires, and save citizens' houses. The U.S. government and insurance companies should coordinate with other charities to come up with enough money to help those who have lost their homes rebuild their lives. As the world's first superpower, as long as the government is willing, this amount of money can still be taken out. Don't let the victims face despair alone after losing their homes. This is not a scene that a superpower should stage.